2025 saw a quiet but devastating shift that's shaken the U.S. economy. Once the most supported allies of America, 7 countries including Germany, India, Mexico, South Korea, France, Brazil, and the United Kingdom now have decided to follow Canada and turn their back on us. No more prioritizing supply chains with the United States. Instead, they've chosen Canada as their new favorite for everything. That leads to a series of American biggest chains like McDonald's, Applebee's, and KFC, built on international visitors, and imported goods are shutting down, one by one. According to the U.S. Travel Association, international visitor spending dropped by $12.3 billion in 2025. Canada, on the other hand, saw a record surge in foreign investment and tourism. But who bear the weight of this shift is Americans. From workers to retirees, they're the ones losing meals, jobs, and also the small comforts that once made life feel steady. They did nothing wrong, yet still ended up as casualties in a global economic upheaval they never chose to be part of. This is the Downturn Report, where the truth gets personal. And today we will reveal 10 big restaurant chains closing down stores right now as 7 nations ditch U.S. for Canada. Let's begin. Number 1, Subway. You won't hear about the collapse of Subways in headlines, but you will notice something wrong when the vegetables become less fresh from your regular sandwich. The reason behind is that those countries that once grew them now decided to leave America behind and send every box to Canada. That's the true story happening in 2025, while 7 lifelong allies quietly shift their trust and trade across the northern border. Even the biggest American chains, starting with Subway, are left in crisis. Back to the good old days, when Subway once stood as a giant. At its peak, over 21,000 stores served millions of middle-class and low-income people across America. The $5 footlong was a way many made it through a workday without breaking the bank. Gradually, it became part of daily rhythm, but that rhythm is breaking. Since 2023, nearly 1,200 Subway locations have closed, not because demand fell, but because the world stopped supplying the U.S. It began with Mexico, long the backbone of fresh produce for Subway's supply chain. Recently, this country has redirected nearly 40% of its exports to Canada's upgraded cold storage hubs. Dutch greenhouse operators, once flooding U.S. ports with hydroponic lettuce and Gouda cheese, now unload exclusively in Ontario, and a $65 million fresh vegetable contract collapsed in 2024 simply because Mexico found a smoother trade route north. Our neighbor Canada, once overlooked, is now the new favorite replacement. While America's tariff walls grow higher, Canada lays new infrastructure, welcoming agri-tech firms from Europe, streamlining visas for Indian logistics talent, and building food corridors that bypass traditional U.S. partnerships. As a result, not only ingredients, but entire logistics chains are shifting away from U.S. soil. That was hard, especially when Subway was already vulnerable. Past controversies, like the scandal around mislabeled meat, or the reputational damage from its former spokesperson, chipped away at public trust. But the final blow came when supply lines froze and tourism thinned, with fewer European and Asian travelers landing in the U.S. Foot traffic at major urban Subway locations dropped sharply. Stores near airports and tourist centers now sit dark, with signs apologizing for menu cuts. But normal people who do absolutely nothing wrong are the one whose consequences hit the hardest. Office workers who relied on a quick, affordable lunch now face longer drives and higher prices. Older Americans who once saw Subway as a familiar option have watched their local locations disappear. Employees who kept stores running through the pandemic are now without jobs. More than just a brand fading, it's the erosion of a small certainty that anchored everyday life. And in the same moment, Subway dims. Smaller chains like Jersey Mike's are expanding into suburban lots once claimed by the giant, because it is less dependent on global partners. But honestly, do you think that could replace Subways now? When even a simple sandwich can't survive the quiet turning away of nations, you have to wonder. Not just what's missing from the menu, but what's been removed from the promise of America itself. Number 2, KFC. Could you imagine one day when you cannot find your favorite meals anymore, even though you still have enough money to afford it? The ingredients might just never have arrived. When frozen shipments from Brazil rerouted to Canada instead of America, your local KFC might be forced to shut their doors, and for the first time, Fast food is unavailable. In 2025, while global supply chains quietly crowned Canada their new priority, KFC, once the pride of American comfort food, is falling into silence. Do you still remember through the 2000s and early 2010, was the time KFC reigned as a symbol of family, fast food, and freedom. With over 4,000 locations across the United States, it was so reachable and ready to serve everyone. In southern states like Georgia and Texas, a bucket of fried chicken was a tradition, a centerpiece of weekend gatherings. But that table's now empty. In just 18 months, over 320 KFC stores have shuttered. Hundreds more face ingredient shortages, with signs reading temporarily closed due to supply disruptions. Brazil once supplied more than 35% of KFC's industrial chicken, but after U.S. tariffs on Brazilian ethanol and steel, Brazil decided to cut food exports and redirect contracts to Canada. JBS, the Brazilian giant behind KFC's poultry, now controls nearly 20% of Canada's meat processing, shifting cold chain logistics northward. Containers that once landed in Charleston now bypass America entirely, docking in Vancouver instead. This is where the secondary collapse unfolds, and this one is about reputation. KFC has battled years of legal issues, accusations of reusing cooking oil, chicken pumped with water, and failure to meet global health trends. After a public backlash in 2023, especially from travelers in France, Brazil, and the UK, international consumers started turning away. Meanwhile, Canada responded with its Clean Fast Food initiative, drawing European investment, strict food safety enforcement, and an image of trust KFC USA couldn't match. News on the paper. But what does that mean for working Americans in places like Louisiana or Mississippi? KFC was often the only place where a few dollars could still buy a hot meal. Now, these stores are dark. Late shift workers drive home on empty stomachs. Families with multiple children no longer have an affordable meal to share. Elderly neighbors, who once treated themselves to a two-piece combo after church, now find only locked doors and silence. The fallout extends beyond food. Employees, many of whom worked at KFC for a decade or longer, have lost their income overnight. These are not executives. They are tax-paying, hard-working people who did everything right with the trust that it will feed their family. Yet they still became collateral in a global economic shift they never asked for. And while KFC retreats, Chick-fil-A is expanding. Their domestic-only supply model, sourcing from U.S. farms, keeps them insulated. They're opening new stores in Florida and the Carolinas, walking right into the gaps KFC left behind. It's enough to make people ask, if one fried chicken chain could adapt, why did the other vanish? Please bear with us a little more, because the next brand will make you realize the country you believed in isn't at the center anymore. And no one thought to warn you before they turned off the fryer. Number 3, McDonald's. A Big Mac was once the most global meal in the world, but now, travelers from France, Germany, and India are skipping New York entirely, choosing Toronto instead. McDonald's stores across America's tourist hubs are running out of reasons to stay open, so as a result, in 2025, even the golden arches once untouchable are flickering out, as many American allies shift quietly toward Canada. That news might be shocking, because McDonald's was never just a restaurant. With over 14,000 locations in the U.S., it shaped the pulse of cities and small towns alike. At Miami and Orlando, international tourists used to crowd the counters, French travelers grabbing a burger after landing, Korean families sharing Happy Meals before road trips. But now, the very locations that once printed money are darkened in just 1 year. More than 200 McDonald's locations near airports and resorts have shuttered, citing limited operations or closed until further notice. Behind the silence lies a profound shift. International arrivals to the U.S. have dropped over 28% compared to 2019. Visitors from top-spending nations like France, Germany, India, and South Korea now favor Canada. They are drawn by flexible visa policies, tourism perks, and seamless logistics. Toronto and Vancouver are rising while New York and San Francisco fade. This is the main rupture, but it's only half the story. As global tourists vanish, so do global ingredients. French cheese, Dutch lettuce, Brazilian beef, once defining elements of flagship McDonald's menus, are now out of reach or doubled in cost. Containers bound for Long Beach or Seattle ports are being rerouted to Vancouver or Montreal, shifting the heartbeat of the supply chain. In the very moment America loses its visitors, it also loses what made its food become international. What hit harder is the erosion of trust. In 2023, CEO Chris Kempczinski was accused of collecting millions in secret bonuses while cutting hours for frontline workers. European countries like France and Germany criticized McDonald's for murky sourcing practices and undue pressure on small farmers. These controversies didn't just damage the brand, they pushed governments and investors to look elsewhere. Canada offered transparency, labor protections, and fewer PR scandals. So as a matter of fact, it became the new safe bet. The cost, as always, lands on everyday people. Workers at airport McDonald's have been laid off or sent home unpaid, even though it was some of the few steady jobs available in suburban neighborhoods. Customers who once relied on a $2 McMuffin now scramble to find an alternative meal at double the cost. Families who treated weekend Happy Meals as tradition now walk past shuttered stores with no more laughter. Meanwhile, In-N-Out Burger remains unshaken by international fallout due to the focus on domestic markets. McDonald's bet everything on being everywhere, and that's what made its collapse so immediate when the world turned. The Big Mac was once a passport to global culture, so what does it mean now when the world quietly cancels American trips? Keep watching, because the next fall down will make you feel even more shocked at what once called long-term cooperation. Number 4. Burger King. You once bit into a Whopper, the smoke of flame-grilled beef still clinging to the bun. Now, all you hear is the hiss of air conditioning in an empty store, because the beef never came. Flights from India and Mexico no longer land with families looking for a taste of America. In 2025, when the world shifts toward Canada, even a fire-grilled burger can go cold before it reaches the counter. Once upon a time, Burger King was a cultural icon. With over 7,000 U.S. locations in 2019, it stood shoulder to shoulder with McDonald's. Its outlets thrived near border crossings, suburban malls, and amusement parks. But those lights are dimming. By mid-2025, over 380 Burger King locations had permanently closed. Hundreds more operate in partial automation because the people and the products are gone. Brazil, once Burger King's main beef supplier, shifted to Canada after steep U.S. tariffs on ethanol and steel in 2024. India, formerly the third largest international tourist base for Burger King's U.S. locations near theme parks, has seen a 35% decline in travelers, citing slow visa approvals and policy inconsistency. Without foreign customers and reliable imports, stores either raise prices nearly 40% or shutter entirely, and trust already shaken. Between 2021 and 2023, Burger King weathered global scandals. Unsafe oil reuse at locations in Mexico and the UK sparked outrage. In 2023, European regulators cited Burger King suppliers for violating humane livestock conditions, prompting France and Germany to freeze trade support. Worse still, the company was accused of squeezing margins on small farms in Brazil and India while offering no support during the pandemic. For nations seeking stability, these weren't mistakes, they were reasons to walk away. That's when the human toll begins. In places like Missouri, Arkansas, and Nevada, where Burger King was the only lunch stop for miles, residents now face padlocked doors and overgrown drive-thrus. Young workers, fresh into jobs they thought could last, are unemployed once again. For a family of 5, used to splitting 2 Whoppers and a kid's meal for under $15. Even fast food has become a luxury. Their only choices either pay double at upscale chains, or cook at home with groceries that now cost 50% more. And while Burger King crumbles, smaller rivals like Five Guys continue to grow. Their secret local sourcing, no international chaos, no broken logistics, just beef from nearby farms and menus built for the neighborhoods they serve. For some, it's a bitter truth, the smaller chain stood tall, while the global giant folded. There are stores that kept their lights on for 20 years now left to fade without so much as a goodbye. But if you thought losing the Whopper was painful, the ovens at Pizza Hut are growing cold next. Number 5. Pizza Hut. You used to order a hot, cheesy pizza every Friday night without thinking. Now, you have to ask the cashier, do you still have the classic crust because the French cheese never made it? The Italian flour is stuck at port. And Pizza Hut once a weekend tradition is becoming just a hollow name on a darkened signboard. At its peak in the early 2010s, Pizza Hut was the #1 pizza chain in America, with over 7,400 locations. But it wasn't just about food, it was where birthdays happened. First dates took place, and Friday nights felt like family. A large pizza meant more than dinner. It was stringy mozzarella, crunchy crust, the smell of oregano in the air, a whole American experience people once flew in to taste. By 2025, over 600 U.S. Pizza Hut locations have closed, especially across the Midwest, Southeast, and cities tied to international travel. What's left are stores with dim lights, silent dining rooms, and signs that read, "Out of stock cheese, sauce, classic crust, France and the Netherlands." The primary exporters of traditional cheeses like mozzarella, Gouda, and Blue slashed exports to the U.S. by over 45% since late 2023. Why? Because America raised tariffs. While Canada offered clear import pathways, bilateral tax waivers, and reliable inspection systems, Italy, source of most durum wheat and premium tomato paste, followed suit, moving contracts north. Portwatch Canada confirms dozens of Pizza Hut-bound containers have been rerouted from Long Beach and Houston to Montreal. Meanwhile, Pizza Hut's internal issues deepened the damage. In 2024, the brand faced a wave of protests after delivery drivers were overworked without wage increases, sparking backlash in multiple states. International backlash also surged. Pizza Hut marketed itself as a symbol of American Italian pride, while quietly sourcing nearly 80% of ingredients from Europe. In 2023, France and Italy criticized its lack of sourcing transparency, leading to revoked marketing support across the EU. Canada, seizing the moment, opened 4 European food distribution hubs in Ontario and Quebec, completely undercutting Pizza Hut's U.S. supply chain. And so, the loss hit home, in places like Kentucky, Ohio, and Tennessee, where families made Friday night dinners at Pizza Hut a tradition. There are no more familiar menus, no more familiar prices. The elderly, once enjoying a $9 salad pizza soda combo in brightly lit booths, now face half-lit spaces offering only takeout, if anything at all. Thousands of workers have lost their shifts. They broke no rules, made no errors, but still got pushed aside because the world stopped choosing America. A slice of pizza once stood for fast, but full of flavor. Now, it's the symbol of a country that no longer holds on to the taste it once shared with the world. Meanwhile, Marco's Pizza, a smaller chain sourcing everything locally from places like Wisconsin and Idaho, continues to grow steadily. And locals admit it quietly, Pizza Hut used to taste better. But Marco's is still here. A slice without cheese, without crust. Might seem like a missing meal, but to many, it's the first moment they realize the old America isn't holding on. And if pizza has grown unfamiliar, what's next for that square burger they trusted from Wendy's #6? Wendys. A square burger once symbolized American pride. Now it's vanishing from highways where closed indefinitely signs outnumber menus. In 2019, Wendy's had over 6,500 U.S. stores and a loyal working class following. With fresh beef, consistent prices, and its quality as our recipe slogan, it became the go-to for late shift workers, border travelers, and families across the Midwest. But in 2025, Wendy's is shrinking faster than at any time since the 2008 recession. Over 400 stores have closed in 1 year, especially in border states and tourism corridors. After U.S. tariffs in 2023, Mexico, Wendy's top beef supplier, rerouted exports to Canada, which offered tax breaks and streamlined food distribution. 60% of Wendy's beef supply has shifted away from U.S. ports like Houston and San Diego, simultaneously. South Korean tourism to American cities collapsed, cutting customer flows in places like California and Arizona. Prior scandals, GMO sauces, unethical meat processing, and low pay during COVID made Wendy's vulnerable. Now, single mothers, toll booth workers, and the elderly find their dependable meal gone. While Culver's thrives on domestic supply, Wendy's fades no longer affordable, no longer open. And if even the square burger can't stay, how long can a warm, late-night breakfast at Dennys survive? #7. Dennys. Remember when every other place was closed? But Dennys still glowed at 2 a.m., not anymore. In 2025, over 200 Dennys locations have shut down, mostly near airports, highways, and city centers once crowded with British, French, and Dutch tourists. Dennys was never just a diner. It was the final open door after church, on night drives, For students and retirees alike, at its peak, over 1,500 outlets stretched from Las Vegas to Miami. But now, international guests are gone. Britain slashed road trip tours by nearly 90%. French visits fell over 35%. And Dutch suppliers rerouted eggs and breakfast produce to Canada. Meanwhile, Dennys' global image collapsed. Viral videos from European tourists showing cold. Greasy meals at California branches triggered outrage. Lawsuits from overnight staff citing poor health support damaged trust further. As Canada built food-friendly travel corridors, Dennys stood still, stuck in bad press and outdated logistics. Now, late-night workers return home hungry. Retirees lose their morning meetup. And thousands of loyal staff, some with 15 years of service, were laid off without warning. If Dennys' 24-hour light has gone dark, what hope remains for candlelit Italian dinners at Olive Garden number 8? Olive Garden. Grated Parmesan on top used to be the warm question before every pasta dish. But in 2025, silence fills those booths. Parmesan no longer arrives. Tourists from France, Germany, and Italy no longer come. And Olive Garden is quietly vanishing one empty table at a time. Once a go-to for family birthdays, post-road trip dinners, and affordable Italian nights, Olive Garden peaked with over 850 U.S. locations. European visitors especially loved its casual warmth. But now, nearly 170 stores, mostly near airports, resorts, and tourist zones have closed. Surviving outlets face ingredient shortages and slashed hours. Why France and Italy rerouted wine, cheese, and pasta exports to Canada in 2024 after U.S. tariff hikes. Germany, once a major tourist and restaurant investor, redirected its funds to Canada's booming dining scene. And Olive Garden didn't help itself. It used cheap oils while claiming high-end ingredients, sparking backlash. Refusing to honor Italy's protected food standards drove suppliers away. Now, retired couples dine from grocery store pasta. Laid-off workers lose not just jobs, but dreams. What was once the heart of American Italian comfort is fading into a memory. And next, even the sea's flavor is drying up with Red Lobster in danger. Number 9. Red Lobster. A basket of fried shrimp once marked the start of a weekend celebration. But now, as you open the menu, the garlic lobster tail, clam chowder, and scallops are gone. Not because of demand, but because the ocean stopped delivering, and Red Lobster is sinking without ever leaving land. At its peak, Red Lobster brought the sea to over 650 U.S. locations. In 2016, it earned more than $2.5 billion serving garlic shrimp, New England chowder, and its iconic cheddar biscuits to tourists and families alike. But by 2025, over 100 branches, mostly along coasts and logistics corridors, have shuttered. Remaining locations offer trimmed menus, delayed ingredients, and half-empty tables. Brazil, once the top exporter of frozen shrimp, shifted 70% of its seafood exports to Canada. France and the Netherlands redirected clam and scallop shipments to new facilities in Halifax. Meanwhile, over 8,000 frozen food containers meant for U.S. ports are stuck or rerouted. Internally, Red Lobster collapsed under years of foreign ownership and inconsistent quality, complaints of watery sauce, unfresh seafood, and slow service spread across tourist platforms in 2023. Investors pulled out, and suppliers found a better partner in Canada's stable seafood network. Now, working-class families no longer find seafood within reach. Retired couples peer through shuttered glass doors, and loyal staff lose their livelihoods without warning, just because the port never called. And if even the ocean retreats from our tables, what happens to our fast? Familiar Asian takeout Panda Express is next facing its own vanishing tide. Number 10. Panda Express. You once grabbed orange chicken before boarding a flight. Today, the tray is empty, the menu board is taped over, and staff simply repeat that item is unavailable. From Florida to Vancouver. Panda Express stands quiet because the very customers it once relied on have now chosen Canada, once the face of American Asian cuisine. Panda Express thrived in airports, outlet malls, and tourist plazas, with over 2,300 locations. It was the go-to for travelers from Korea, India, and China who craved fast food with familiar flavors. In its prime, branches in Los Angeles, Seattle, and Orlando overflowed at lunch. But from 2024 to 2025, more than 150 outlets have shuttered, especially in tourist zones. as Asian visitors vanished. South Korea and India redirected more than 70% of their tours to Canada, citing easier visas and dual tourism education programs. Corporate travel from Samsung and Infosys has shifted to Toronto, leaving entire clusters of U.S. Panda Express locations without customers. According to CNN Business, orders for soy sauce and sesame oil dropped sharply as ingredient shipments rerouted to Vancouver, and Statista confirms Asian international travel to the U.S. is down 38% from 2019 crippling chains like Panda Express that depend on heat and go familiarity. While the U.S. tightened port checks and visas, Canada built entire Asian culinary districts in British Columbia and slashed tariffs for imports from Asia. Meanwhile, Panda simplified its recipes, lost its nuance, lost trust. Outlet workers now travel miles for lunch. Asian American employees quietly laid off. Suburban families stare at a temporarily closed sign that hasn't changed in weeks. Din Tai Fung, a premium chain with strict quality control and no franchising, thrives by honoring tradition. Panda, once the everyday hero, now finds itself abandoned on home soil. And maybe the saddest sight isn't cold chicken, but a once beloved country slowly fading from the world's appetite dish by dish, bite by bite, memory by memory. These weren't just restaurants. They were habits, memories, and anchors for everyday life. But as the world quietly turns away, America watches its plates grow emptier one closure at a time. Not because the food changed, but because trust did. If you felt this shift in your town, in your routine, in your wallet, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments below because sometimes the smallest meals hold the deepest meaning.